Alright, listen close because this isn't just another urban legend they tell tourists down by the pier. Have you ever heard a sound that made you want to walk into the water? Not just the calming waves but something else, something deeper that pulled at you like a secret promise whispered on the tide? Yeah, well, in Port Blossom they say that sound isn't just in your head. They say it's the city singing, and if you listen too closely, it might just sing you right into the depths. Port Blossom, Maine. Picture postcard pretty on the surface. Cobblestone streets, clapboard houses clinging to the cliffs, a lighthouse blinking faithfully out to sea. Tourists flock here for the lobster rolls and the salty air, but locals know there's a different current running beneath the charming facade. The city is built on a series of interconnected islands, a web of land woven together by bridges and ferries, all surrounded by the restless Atlantic. That's the unusual feature, see? Water, water everywhere, seeping into the very bones of the place. And not just any water, but the cold, dark, churning water of the North Atlantic, the kind that swallows ships whole and keeps its secrets deep. I'm Sarah, by the way. Used to be a journalist in Boston, chasing down political scandals and corporate greed. Burned out, frankly. Needed a change of pace, something quieter. Port Blossom seemed perfect. Quaint, coastal, far from the city grind. I picked up a freelance gig with a local paper, the Port Blossom Beacon, mostly writing puff pieces about the annual clam bake and the cutest dog contest. Exciting stuff, right? But beneath the surface, even in a town like this, stories simmer. It started subtly. A missing fisherman, Old Man Hemlock, went out in his trawler one foggy morning and never came back. Coast Guard searched, found nothing but his empty boat drifting miles offshore. Tragic, sure, but these things happen at sea. Then, a week later, a young woman, a college student home for the summer, vanished from the boardwalk late one night. No witnesses, no signs of struggle, just gone. Disappeared into thin air, or rather, into the thick sea air that blankets Port Blossom most nights. The local PD chalked it up to misadventure, maybe a late-night swim gone wrong, despite the fact she was fully clothed when last seen. But then it happened again. And again. A tourist couple taking a moonlight stroll along the beach. A teenager walking home from a friend's house near the harbor. People, mostly alone, mostly near the water, vanishing without a trace. At first it was just whispers. Bad luck, some said. The sea takes its due, others muttered, echoing old seafaring superstitions. But the whispers grew louder, more anxious as the disappearances mounted. People started locking their doors earlier, avoiding the waterfront after dark. A palpable fear settled over Port Blossom, a damp, clinging fear, just like the ever-present sea fog. That's when I started paying attention. Journalist instincts, I guess. Something felt off. Too many disappearances too quickly in such a small, close-knit community. And the way people talked about it, the hushed tones, the averted eyes, it wasn't just fear, it was something deeper. Something ancient. One particularly foggy night, I was working late at the Beacon office, the only one left in the building. The fog was thick outside, pressing against the windows like a damp shroud. The usual city sounds were muffled, muted by the dense air. And then I heard it. A sound, faint at first, almost subliminal. A low, humming drone just below the threshold of hearing. I paused, listening, thinking it was just the building settling, or maybe the wind whistling through the old window frames. But it wasn't. The sound grew, slowly, subtly, morphing from a hum into something more melodic. A low, resonant tone, like a cello played underwater. It vibrated through the floorboards, through my bones, a deep, resonant frequency that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my chest. It wasn't loud, not exactly, but it was present. Impossible to ignore. And it was beautiful. Hauntingly, achingly beautiful. Melancholy yet alluring. It tugged at something deep inside me, a primal chord, a longing I couldn't quite name. It made me want to go somewhere. Towards the sound. Towards the water. I stood up, drawn to the window, peering out into the swirling fog. The streetlights cast hazy halos in the mist, illuminating nothing but more fog. But the sound, it seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. From the city itself. From the water that surrounded it. I felt a compulsion, an almost irresistible urge to go outside, to walk towards the harbor, to find the source of that song. My legs felt heavy, yet they wanted to move. My mind was telling me to stay inside, that something was wrong, but my body was pulling me towards the door. That's when I saw him. Mr. Abernathy, the Beacon's elderly night janitor, shuffling down the hallway towards the front door. He was usually gone by 9 p.m., but it was almost midnight. "Mr. Abernathy?" I called out, my voice sounding strangely distant even to my own ears. He didn't respond. He just kept walking, his eyes fixed straight ahead, a strange, vacant expression on his face. I hurried after him, a growing unease prickling my skin. "Mr. Abernathy, it's late. Where are you going?" I reached out and touched his arm. He stopped but didn't turn. His skin was cold, clammy. His eyes, when I finally managed to get in front of him, were wide, unfocused, like he was looking at something far away, something only he could see. "The song," he whispered, his voice raspy, barely audible above the humming drone that now filled the office. "It's calling me." "What song?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mr. Abernathy, what are you talking about?" He didn't answer. He just started walking again, towards the door, towards the street, towards the fog-shrouded city. And the sound, it seemed to grow louder as he moved, pulling him, guiding him like an invisible leash. Panic seized me. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a strange sound. This was something else. Something dangerous. I grabbed Mr. Abernathy's arm again, pulling him back hard. He resisted, surprisingly strong for an old man, his eyes still fixed on some unseen point in the distance. "Mr. Abernathy, no. You can't go out there." I struggled with him for a moment, my adrenaline surging, the humming sound vibrating in my skull. Finally, I managed to drag him back into the office, away from the door, away from the pull of the song. He slumped against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the vacant look slowly fading from his eyes. "Sarah?" he mumbled, blinking, his gaze finally focusing on me. What happened?" You were going outside, Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice still trembling. "You said the song was calling you." He looked confused, then a flicker of fear crossed his face. "Song? I don't remember any song. I felt drawn. Like I had to go to the water." He shuddered, wrapping his arms around himself. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for stopping me. I don't know what came over me. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, the faint hum of the song still resonating in my ears, even after Mr. Abernathy had gone home, shaken but safe. I started researching. Local history, maritime folklore, anything about strange sounds or disappearances in Port Blossom. I dug through old newspaper archives, town records, even online forums dedicated to local legends. And I found things. Whispers in the past, echoes of the present. Old fishermen's tales of a drowning song that lured sailors to their doom in the fog. Stories of unexplained drownings throughout Port Blossom's history, always during periods of heavy fog, always accompanied by reports of a strange, alluring sound. Legends of ancient sea creatures, sirens, mermaids, things from the deep that sang songs of enchantment and death. It all sounded like folklore, old wives' tales, the kind of stuff you tell around a campfire to scare tourists. But the recent disappearances, Mr. Abernathy's trance-like state, the humming sound, it all started to coalesce, to form a disturbing pattern. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to these old legends. Maybe the drowning song wasn't just a story. Maybe it was real. The tension in Port Blossom was palpable in the days that followed. People were on edge, jumpy, listening for the sound. The police were baffled, the mayor was issuing reassurances, but everyone felt it, that undercurrent of fear, the sense that something was lurking beneath the surface of their charming coastal town. Then it happened again. And this time it was worse. A group of teenagers, daring each other, went down to the harbor late one night, trying to record the siren song, as they jokingly called it. They were found the next morning. Or rather, parts of them were found washed up on the rocks, mangled, broken, like they had been dragged down and then torn apart. The official report called it a boating accident, a rogue wave, anything to avoid the real, terrifying truth. But the truth was there, in the whispers, in the fear-filled eyes of the townsfolk, in the persistent humming drone that now seemed to be a constant presence in Port Blossom, especially when the fog rolled in. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just write puff pieces while people were disappearing, while teenagers were being ripped apart. I started digging deeper, talking to locals, especially the older ones, the ones who remembered the old stories, the ones who still held on to the ancient fears. I met with Mrs. Evelyn, an old woman who lived in a weathered cottage overlooking the harbor. She was practically a living encyclopedia of Port Blossom folklore. Her eyes were cloudy with age, but they held a sharp, knowing glint. "The sirens," she said, her voice a low, gravelly whisper when I asked her about the drowning song. "They've always been here, sleeping mostly. But sometimes they wake up." "Sirens?" I asked, trying to keep the skepticism out of my voice. "You mean like mythical creatures?" She chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Mythical to you city folk, maybe, but here in Port Blossom we know better. They're not creatures with fish tails and pretty voices, dearie. They're something older. Something from before the world was like it is now. Something that lives in the deep places, in the darkness under the waves. She told me stories, chilling tales passed down through generations, of beings that lived beneath the sea, beings of immense power and ancient hunger. They weren't beautiful, not in the way the myths described. They were shapeless, fluid creatures of sound and shadow that could manipulate the very fabric of the water and the minds of those who listened to their song. The song, she said, her voice dropping even lower, it's not meant for human ears. It's a call, a lure to bring them down, to feed them. Feed them? I asked, a cold dread creeping into my heart. Feed what? The city, she said simply, Port Blossom, is built on their territory, you see. They were here first. And the city, it's like a beacon to them, a source of energy, of life. But sometimes they get hungry, and they sing. She told me the fog amplified the song, carried it further, made it stronger. And the city itself, the network of islands, the bridges, the harbor, it all acted like a resonator, amplifying the sound, drawing people in, trapping them in its deadly embrace. The climax came during the annual Port Blossom Maritime Festival. The town was packed with tourists, the harbor was bustling with boats, the air was filled with the smell of salt and fried seafood. And the fog rolled in. Thick, heavy, suffocating fog, blanketing the city in a dense, white shroud. The music started subtly, almost imperceptibly, woven into the festive sounds of the festival. But it was there, that low humming drone, growing louder, more insistent as the fog thickened. People started to notice it, to pause, to listen. The festive chatter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. Then the singing began. Not human singing, not exactly, but something melodic, ethereal, haunting, beautiful, in a way that was both alluring and terrifying. It rose from the water, from the fog, from the very stones of the city, enveloping everything in its mesmerizing embrace. People started moving. Slowly at first, then faster, drawn towards the water, towards the source of the song. Tourists, locals, children, adults, all walking like sleepwalkers, their eyes glazed over, their faces blank, drawn by the irresistible pull of the siren's call. Panic erupted. Screams pierced the fog-laden air. People tried to stop others, to pull them back from the edge of the harbor, from the piers, from the beaches. But it was like trying to hold back the tide. The song was too strong. The pull was too powerful. I was there, caught in the chaos, watching in horror as people walked, stumbled, plunged into the icy water. The harbor became a scene of pandemonium, of screams and splashes, of people desperately trying to save those who were being lured to their doom. I saw a young mother, her toddler in her arms, walking straight towards the pier, her eyes fixed on the fog-shrouded water, the siren song pulling her forward. I ran towards her, shouting, trying to break through the spell. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back with all my might. She turned, her eyes blank, unseeing. The song, she whispered, her voice like a dream. I have to go to the song. I struggled with her, desperate, terrified. And then something shifted. The song changed. It shifted in tone, in frequency, becoming harsher, more discordant, less alluring, more predatory. It was like the sirens had gotten what they wanted. The lure was over. Now it was time to feed. The water in the harbor started to churn, to bubble, to move in unnatural ways. Dark shapes stirred beneath the surface, unseen but felt, sensed in the growing terror that gripped the city. Screams turned to shrieks, as people realized they weren't just being drawn to the water to drown. Something was in the water. Something hungry. That's when the twist came. It wasn't sirens, not in the way Mrs. Evelyn described, not ancient sea creatures. It was the city itself. Port Blossom, built on those islands, surrounded by the restless sea, it wasn't just a city. It was something else. Something alive. The city was the siren. The buildings, the bridges, the harbor, they were all part of a vast, interconnected organism, drawing energy from the sea and from the people who lived within it. The song wasn't a sound, not exactly. It was a resonance, a vibration generated by the city itself, amplified by the fog in the water, a psychic call that tapped into something primal in the human brain, a deep-seated longing for the sea, for the depths, for the unknown. And the disappearances, the drownings, the mangled bodies, it wasn't feeding creatures in the water. It was the city feeding itself, drawing life force, energy from its victims, to sustain its strange, unnatural existence. The climax of the festival became a massacre. Scores of people were lost that night, pulled into the churning water, consumed by the city's hunger. The fog finally lifted at dawn, revealing a city shattered, traumatized, stained with loss and fear. Port Blossom never recovered. People left in droves, businesses closed, the charming coastal town became a ghost of its former self. The city was still there, beautiful, picturesque, but tainted, haunted, singing its silent, deadly song. I left too eventually. Couldn't stay in a place that felt so alive and yet so predatory. But I still hear the song sometimes in my dreams, in the rush of the wind, in the sound of the rain. And I wonder, is it just Port Blossom? Or are there other cities, coastal metropolises, built on ancient foundations, singing their own drowning songs, luring their victims to the depths? Have you ever lived in a coastal city? Have you ever felt that pull, that strange allure of the sea, especially when the fog rolls in? Have you ever heard a sound that made you want to walk into the water? If you have, maybe you've heard the sirens too. And maybe, just maybe, you should listen a little less closely. Because in some cities, the most beautiful songs can be the deadliest.